Commander Lee Minho stared at the communications screen in disbelief. The signal from New Busan Colony had cut to static 3 minutes ago. Before that, there had been screaming. The kind of screaming that would haunt him for the rest of his life. "Sir, we're receiving multiple distress signals from the outer settlements," reported Lieutenant Kim So-min from her station. Her voice shook despite her training. "They're saying the sky is on fire." Minho gripped the armrest of his command chair. New Busan was supposed to be safe. It was an agricultural world, far from any known hostile territories. 2.5 million people lived there. Farmers, teachers, children. His own sister had moved there last year with her family. "Get me Governor Park Ji-won on emergency channels," he ordered. "I've been trying, sir. No response from the capital." The main screen flickered to life, showing grainy footage from an orbital satellite. What Minho saw made his blood freeze. Purple beams of energy were cutting through New Busan's atmosphere like deadly rain. Each beam struck the surface and turned everything for miles around into molten glass. "Dear God," whispered Dr. Han Junho from behind him. The weapons researcher had arrived on the bridge just minutes before the attack began. "Those are particle accelerator arrays, military grade." "Who would attack New Busan?" Minho asked. "We have no enemies out there." The answer came in the form of a transmission that cut through all communication channels. The voice was cold, mechanical, speaking broken human standard. "Species designation: human. You have been judged contamination to pure galaxy. Your expansion ends now. Keltheran Empire claims right of purification. This world is first of many. Submit or face extinction." Minho felt rage building in his chest. "Keltheran Empire? I've never heard of them." "Sir," So-min called out, her face pale. "I'm detecting massive ships in the New Busan system. 60 vessels minimum. They're huge." The satellite feed showed glimpses of the attacking fleet through the smoke and debris. The ships were dark purple, covered in sharp angles and weapon ports. They moved with practiced efficiency like this was something they had done many times before. Another transmission burst through the static. This time it was Governor Park. Ji-won's voice, broken and desperate. "This is Governor Park to any Earth forces. We're evacuating what civilians we can." The alien ships appeared without warning and began bombardment immediately. "They're targeting population centers first. We estimate, God help us, we estimate 2 million already dead. I'm loading the last transport ships now." The signal cut to static again. Minho watched the satellite feed as transport ships lifted off from New Busan's surface. Most made it into space, but several were shot down by the alien vessels. Each explosion represented hundreds of lives lost. "How many transports escaped?" he asked. So-min worked at her console frantically. 47 ships confirmed in space. That's roughly 50,000 people, sir. 50,000 out of 2.5 million. Minho closed his eyes for a moment, trying to process the numbers. It was the largest loss of human life in history. "Sir, we're receiving another alien transmission," reported Communications Officer Choi Hyun-woo. "Put it through." The same cold voice filled the bridge. "Human colony purification complete. Surface sterilized. Warning transmitted to all human worlds. You have 30 cycles to withdraw from all territories beyond your birth system. Non-compliance will result in systematic purification of all human presence." The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in stunned silence. Dr. Han Junho stepped forward. "Commander, we need to contact Earth immediately. This isn't just an attack on one colony. They're threatening all of humanity." Minho nodded slowly. His mind was already working through the implications. If these Keltherans could destroy New Busan so easily, what could they do to Earth's other colonies? There were dozens of human worlds now, millions of people living on planets throughout local space. "So-min, start gathering the survivor ships. I want them all brought to Station Gagarin for medical care and debriefing. And get me a direct line to Earth Command." "Yes, sir." Over the next several hours, the full scope of the disaster became clear. The Keltharan fleet had used advanced particle beam weapons to superheat New Busan's atmosphere. The attack was surgical and devastating. They had destroyed every major city in the first wave, then systematically eliminated smaller settlements. The refugee coordinator, Kim Samin, worked tirelessly to process the survivors as they arrived at the station. Many were badly burned from radiation exposure. Others suffered from shock and trauma. She listened to their stories with growing horror. "They came from nowhere," said farmer Lim Yuna, clutching her young daughter. "One moment we were harvesting the corn. The next the sky turned purple and everything started burning." Another survivor, teacher Bae Doyeon, described how the aliens had broadcast surrender demands in broken Korean before beginning the bombardment. "They gave us 10 minutes to surrender the entire planet. 10 minutes. How do you surrender a whole world in 10 minutes? The most disturbing reports came from the few survivors who had seen the Keltheran ground forces. They described tall, insectoid creatures in powered armor, methodically destroying anything that had survived the orbital bombardment. They took no prisoners. They showed no mercy. Dr. Han Junho spent those hours analyzing the weapon signatures from the attack. What he found made him sick to his stomach. The Keltherans had used clean particle beams designed to minimize long-term radiation. They wanted the planet intact for their own use eventually. This wasn't rage or hatred, he explained to Minho. This was extermination with a plan. They want to take our worlds for themselves. Meanwhile, Earth's response was swift but scattered. President Yoon Mira had declared a state of emergency and begun mobilizing the Terran fleet. But Earth's ships were designed for exploration and colony protection, not warfare against a superior alien force. Admiral Choi Hyun-woo, Minho's former commanding officer, arrived at Station Gagarin aboard the flagship Seoul's Pride. When he saw the refugee ships and heard the survivor testimonies, his face turned to stone. "Minho, I need you to understand something," Hyun-woo said in private. "Earth is considering surrender." "What?" Minho couldn't believe what he was hearing. "The Council thinks we can negotiate, maybe give up the outer colonies in exchange for peace." Minho felt fury building inside him. "Admiral, they murdered 2.5 million people. They called us contamination. There's no negotiating with that." Hyun-woo nodded grimly. "I agree, but we're outnumbered and outgunned, unless we have some advantage they don't know about." That's when Dr. Han Junho approached them with a classified tablet. "Actually, sir, we might have exactly that," the doctor explained Project Stellarside in whispered tones. It was theoretical, untested, and absolutely devastating. The weapon could cause a star to go supernova by introducing specific quantum fluctuations into the stellar core. It would destroy everything in the system, Junho explained. Every planet, every ship, every living thing. Minho stared at the weapon specifications. How long would it take? 72 hours from activation to stellar collapse. And once it starts, there's no way to stop it. Admiral Hyun-woo was quiet for a long moment. Then he made a decision that would change the course of galactic history. "Dr. Han, how quickly can you prepare the device for deployment?" "The prototype is already built, sir. We'd need a stealth ship to get it close to their star. Then we're going to send the Keltherans a message they'll never forget," Hyun-woo said. "They want to purify human space? Let's show them what purification really means." As the three men stood looking out at the refugee ships, each knew they were crossing a line that could never be uncrossed. But the images of New Busan's burning surface and the cries of orphaned children had already made that choice for them. The war for humanity's survival was about to begin, and it would end with fire that burned hotter than any star. The emergency session of Earth's High Council had been going for 12 hours. President Yoon Mira sat at the head of the long table, her face showing the strain of impossible decisions. Around her, the most powerful people in human space argued about the future of their species. "We cannot win a conventional war against them," said Defense Secretary Park Ji-won, his voice heavy with exhaustion. "Their technology is centuries ahead of ours. Our best ships are barely armed transports compared to their warships." Admiral Choi Hyun-woo stood at the front of the room, pointing to holographic displays of Keltheran fleet movements. "Intelligence confirms they have over 300 major warships spread across 12 systems. Each one could destroy our entire colonial fleet single-handed. Foreign Minister Lee Sujin leaned forward. Then we negotiate. We find out what they want and see if we can reach a compromise. They've already told us what they want, snapped Colonial Administrator Kim Min-jae. Complete human withdrawal from all worlds except Earth. They called us contamination, Minister. You don't negotiate with people who see you as a disease. President. Mira raised her hand for silence. Dr. Han, what do our scientific assessments tell us about their capabilities? Dr. Han Junho activated his own holographic display. The weapons they used on New Busan are particle beam arrays powered by contained antimatter reactions. The energy output is staggering, but there's something interesting about their attack pattern. He highlighted the orbital bombardment sequence. They hit population centers first, then infrastructure, but they used clean-burning weapons that left the land mostly intact. This wasn't random destruction. They want our worlds for themselves. That changes nothing, said General Nam Tae-hyun from his position near the wall. Dead is dead, whether they want the real estate or not. Minister Lee tried again. Perhaps we could negotiate a smaller human zone. Keep Earth and maybe 5 or 6 colonies. And what happens when they decide that's still too much contamination? Admiral Hyunwoo asked. We've seen their pattern. First they demand submission, then they demand reduction, finally they demand extinction. President Mira studied the faces around the table. Half wanted to fight a war they couldn't win. Half wanted to surrender to an enemy that saw them as vermin. Neither option offered hope for humanity's future. There is a third option, Dr. Han Junho said quietly. The room fell silent. All eyes turned to the scientist. Project Stellarside, he continued. It's been theoretical until now, but the technology exists. Explain, the president said. Dr. Han activated a new display showing complex stellar physics equations. Stars are held in balance by competing forces. Gravity pulls inward, fusion pressure pushes outward. If you can disrupt that balance at the quantum level, you can cause stellar collapse. Defense Secretary Park frowned. You're talking about destroying stars? I'm talking about turning stars into weapons. A single device properly placed can cause any star to go supernova within 72 hours. The room erupted in shocked voices. Minister Lee stood up. You're suggesting genocide on a scale never before imagined. They committed genocide first, General Nam said coldly. 2.5 million humans are dead because these aliens decided we don't deserve to exist. President Mira held up her hand again. Dr. Han, have you tested this weapon? Computer simulations only, Madam President. But the physics is sound. We've identified the specific quantum frequencies needed to destabilize stellar cores. Admiral Hyunwoo was studying the technical specifications. How close would a ship need to get to deploy this device? Within the star's corona, it would require a stealth approach and a crew willing to sacrifice themselves for the mission. I'll go, General Nam said immediately. My special operations teams are trained for suicide missions. This isn't just a suicide mission, Dr. Han said grimly. This is annihilation of an entire star system. Every planet, every space station, every living thing in that system would die. The weight of that statement settled over the room like a heavy blanket. They were discussing the power to kill billions of beings with a single weapon. Minister Lee sat back down heavily. There has to be another way. Some form of diplomatic solution. As if summoned by her words, the communications officer entered the chamber. Madam President, we're receiving a transmission from the Keltheran Empire. Put it through the main screen. The image that appeared was disturbing. The Keltheran leader was tall and insectoid, with multiple arms and eyes that glowed purple. When it spoke, its voice was filled with contempt. Human leaders, I am Supreme War Marshal Thekvar of the Keltheran Empire. Your species has spread like infection across pure space. This infection must be cleansed. President Mira stepped forward. We are willing to discuss peaceful coexistence. The alien made a sound that might have been laughter. Coexistence is impossible. Your kind reproduces too quickly and spreads too far. You will withdraw to your birth world within 30 of your cycles. Any human presence beyond that world will be purified. And if we refuse, the president asked, then we will systematically sterilize every world you contaminate. Your choice is simple. Retreat to one world, or watch all your worlds burn. Transmission ended, leaving the council chamber in heavy silence. Colonial Administrator Kim Min-jae was the first to speak. 30 days. They're giving us 30 days to abandon dozens of colonies and millions of people. We could evacuate the populations, suggested Minister Lee weakly. To where? Admiral Hyunwoo asked. Earth can't support 50 million refugees, and they'd just be postponing the inevitable. Once we're trapped on one world, we're at their mercy, forever. President Mira walked to the large window overlooking Earth. The blue planet turned slowly below, peaceful and unaware of the impossible choice facing its leaders. Dr. Han, how many people live in the Keltheran home system? The scientist consulted his datapad. Intelligence estimates 18 billion, Madam President. Their homeworld has 16 billion, plus major colonies and space stations throughout the system. 18 billion lives, she repeated, against 2.5 million they've already murdered. With respect, Madam President, General Nam said, this isn't about numbers, it's about survival. They've made it clear they see us as an infection to be eliminated. If we don't stop them now, they'll hunt down every human in the galaxy. Dr. Han Junho looked around the room nervously. There's something else about the stellar weapon. Once deployed, there's no way to recall it. The quantum cascade becomes self-sustaining after a certain point. How long do we have before it becomes irreversible? President Mira asked. Approximately 48 hours after activation. After that point, even destroying the device won't stop the stellar collapse. Admiral Hyunwoo studied the star charts. The Keltheran home system of Velketh is heavily defended. Getting a ship close enough to deploy the weapon would require a miracle. Or very good pilots, General Nam said. My best stealth team could do it. Minister Lee made one last attempt. Madam President, please consider the moral implications. We would be destroying an entire star system. Billions of innocent beings. Innocent? General Nam turned on her. Were the children on New Busan guilty of something? Were the farmers contaminating pure space by growing food? President Mira returned to her chair. The Keltherans have given us 30 days. In that time, I want 3 things prepared. First, Admiral Hyunwoo, begin evacuation of our most vulnerable colonies. If we can't protect them, at least we can save some lives. Yes, Madam President. Second, Dr. Han, I want Project Stellarside ready for deployment within 72 hours. Full technical specifications and a working device. The scientist nodded, grimly. It will be ready. Third, General Nam, select your best team for a stealth mission into enemy territory. They need to understand this may be a one-way trip. Understood, Madam President. Minister Lee stood up. I must protest this decision. We're talking about committing genocide. President Mira looked at her with tired eyes. Minister, they've already committed genocide against us. The only question now is whether we allow them to finish the job. She turned to address the entire council. Let me be clear about something. The Keltherans have declared war on our entire species. They see us as contamination to be cleansed. There will be no negotiation, no compromise, no peaceful coexistence. They will hunt us down planet by planet until every human is dead. The president stood up, her voice growing stronger. But they've made one critical mistake. They think we're soft. They think we'll roll over and die like whatever other species they've purified before. They have no idea what humans are capable of when we're pushed to the edge. Admiral Hyunwoo nodded slowly. The Keltherans wanted to send us a message with New Busan. They wanted to show us their power and break our will to fight. Instead, General Nam said with a cold smile, they've given us the justification to use the most powerful weapon ever created. Dr. Han Junho looked uncomfortable. Madam President, I feel I should mention that stellar destruction would be visible across half the galaxy. Every spacefaring species would know what we did. Good, President Mira said firmly. Let them all know. Let them understand that humanity will go to any length necessary to protect our people. If someone wants to test our resolve, they can look at what remains of the Velketh system and reconsider. Captain Nam Taehyun checked his ship's stealth systems for the 20th time in an hour. The Silent Thunder was humanity's most advanced stealth vessel, but they were about to test it against technology far beyond human understanding. Ghost, fleet is assembled and ready for departure, reported his navigator Kang Dong-yun. All ships showing green across the board. Taehyun nodded. 5 ships total, each carrying volunteers who knew they probably wouldn't return. The main mission belonged to Silent Thunder, but the other ships would create diversions and gather intelligence along the route to Velketh. Engineer Oh Minju, status on our special cargo? From the engineering station, Oh Minju called back. Stellar side device is secure and ready for deployment. Dr. Han's team finished the final calibrations an hour ago. The device itself was smaller than Taehyun had expected, about the size of a large refrigerator. It contained quantum field generators that could destabilize the nuclear fusion process inside a star. Once deployed, it would sink into the star's corona and begin its terrible work. All stations, this is Admiral Hyunwoo. You are carrying the hopes of humanity with you. The Keltherans think they can murder our people without consequence. Show them how wrong they are. The Ghost Fleet departed Earth's solar system using a complex route that would take them through 17 different systems. Most were empty space, but 3 contained the remains of worlds the Keltherans had purified before. The first dead world they encountered was in the Kepler 442 system. Long-range sensors showed a planet that had once supported life, now reduced to a ball of cooling glass. Taehyun ordered a closer look. Jesus, whispered communications specialist Lim Yuna as the images appeared on screen. Look at the surface patterns. The planet's surface showed clear evidence of cities, roads, buildings, agricultural areas. All of it melted into twisted glass sculptures by the same particle beams that had destroyed New Busan. How old are these? Attacks? Taehyun asked. Oh Minju ran spectral analysis on the radiation signatures. Based on decay patterns, I'd say about 50 years, maybe 60. They've been doing this for decades, Kang Dong-hyun said with disgust. How many species have they wiped out? The answer came at the second dead world. This one showed signs of more advanced civilization. Massive cities, space elevators, orbital habitats, all destroyed with methodical precision. The radiation patterns suggested the attack was over 100 years old. Captain, Oh Minju called from her station. I'm detecting artificial structures on the surface. They look like monuments? The images showed towering spires made of the same purple metal as Keltheran ships. Each spire was surrounded by geometric patterns carved into the glassed surface. Victory monuments, Taehyun realized. They marked their successful purifications. Dr. Shin Arium, the ethics observer assigned to the mission, studied the images with growing horror. How many species have they eliminated? Based on what we're seeing, probably dozens, Taehyun replied. Maybe hundreds over the centuries. The third dead world was the worst. It had been a garden planet, with 3 major continents covered in what had once been forests and cities. The Keltheran monuments here were larger, more elaborate. This had been a special victory for them. Captain, I'm picking up artificial signals from the third planet, reported Lim Yuna. It's faint, but there's definitely some kind of transmission. They moved closer, careful to avoid Keltheran patrol routes. The signal was coming from underground beneath one of the melted cities. It's a automated distress beacon, Yuna said after analyzing the transmission. Playing on repeat for over 200 years. The message was in an alien language, but the universal translator provided a rough interpretation. This is Sanctuary, 7 of the Aldorian Republic. We are the last survivors. The Skyburners came without warning. Our world dies, but we remember. We remember our children. We remember our hope. To whoever finds this message, know that we were here. Know that we loved. Know that we tried to live. The bridge fell silent. 200 years, and the beacon was still playing. Still crying out for someone to remember a dead species. Dr. Shin, Ariam wiped tears from her eyes. How can we become like them? How can we commit the same atrocity? Because if we don't, Taehyun said quietly, in 200 years, someone might find a beacon from New Busan playing the same message. The ghost fleet continued toward Velketh, each dead world strengthening their resolve. These weren't isolated incidents. The Keltherans were systematic exterminators who had been cleansing the galaxy for centuries. 3 days into the journey, they encountered their first live Keltheran patrol. 2 warships cruising between systems, probably looking for more targets to purify. All stop, Taehyun ordered. Full stealth mode. The silent thunder drifted silently as the alien ships passed nearby. Taehyun could see their distinctive purple hulls and the weapon arrays that had turned New Busan into molten rock. They're scanning the area, Kang Donghyun reported. But they're not detecting us. The Keltheran ships continued on their patrol route, completely unaware that humanity's deadliest weapon was drifting just a few thousand kilometers away. That's good intel, Oh Minju said. Our stealth technology works against their sensors. 1. Advantage, Taehyun agreed. We'll need every edge we can get. As they approached the outer reaches of Velketh space, long-range sensors began detecting the Keltheran home system. It was massive. 16 planets, hundreds of space stations, thousands of ships moving in organized patterns. Population density confirms intelligence estimates, reported Lim Yuna. 18 billion Keltherans in system. Dr. Shin Ariam studied the readings. They have families there. Children. People who never heard of New Busan or humans. So did the Aldorians, Taehyun replied. So did the dozens of other species they've murdered. The Keltherans made their choice when they decided to become galactic exterminators. The final approach to Velketh Prime took another 18 hours. They had to navigate through multiple defensive perimeters, each one designed to detect and destroy intruders. Their star is beautiful, Oh Minju observed as Velketh Prime appeared on the main screen. It was larger than Earth's sun, burning with a brilliant blue-white light. In 72 hours, it's going to be a lot less beautiful, Kang Donghyun said. They reached the deployment zone just as the star's activity cycle hit its minimum phase. Dr. Han's calculations required precise timing to ensure the quantum disruption would take hold properly. Stellar side device ready for deployment, Oh Minju reported. All systems showing green. Taehyun took a deep breath. Once they released the device, there would be no going back. In 3 days, this star would explode with the force of 10 billion nuclear weapons taking an entire civilization with it. Any final thoughts? He asked his crew. Remember New Busan, Lim Yuna said simply. Remember all the dead worlds, added Kang Donghyun. Remember that we tried the peaceful way first, Dr. Shin Ariam said, though her voice shook. Oh Minju initiated the deployment sequence. Device away. Quantum field generators are activating, sinking into stellar corona now. The device disappeared, into the star's burning surface invisible to Keltheran sensors. Deep inside Velketh Prime, quantum fields began their slow work of disrupting nuclear fusion processes. How long before they notice something's wrong? Taehyun asked. Dr. Han estimates 48 hours before obvious stellar irregularities appear, 60 hours before they realize it's artificial, 72 hours before supernova. Taehyun ordered course change for the outer system. They needed to escape Keltheran space before the weapon's effects became obvious. As silent thunder slipped away from the doomed star, Taehyun looked back at the Keltheran home system one last time. Billions of beings going about their lives completely unaware that their sun was now a ticking time bomb. Captain, Dr. Shin Ariam said quietly, what have we become? Taehyun considered the question as they jumped to hyperspace. We've become what we needed to become. The Kelterans wanted to teach humanity about purification. Now they're going to learn that lesson themselves. Behind them, deep in the core of Velketh Prime, quantum fields continued their invisible work. The countdown to stellar death had begun, and nothing in the universe could stop it now. The ghost fleet disappeared into dark space, carrying news of humanity's response back to Earth. In 3 days, the galaxy would witness the birth of humanity's reputation as the species that could kill stars. The Keltharans had started this war with genocide. Humanity was about to finish it with something far worse. War Marshal Thekvar stood in the command center of the Keltharan home fleet, watching the tactical displays with growing unease. The human response to their ultimatum was not what he had expected. "Report from Fleet Commander Zeklon in the human border zone," announced his aide, Sub-Marshal Kreldar. "The humans are not withdrawing as predicted. Instead, they appear to be reinforcing their outer colonies." Thekvar's 4 eyes focused on the battle reports streaming in from human space. "Explain." "Rather than surrender, the humans have begun attacking our patrol fleets. They're using suicide tactics, ramming our ships with vessels loaded with nuclear weapons." This was troubling news. In the 300 cycles since the Keltharan Empire began its purification campaigns, no species had responded with such ferocity. Most surrendered after a single demonstration of Keltharan power. "Losses?" Thekvar asked. "Minimal, War Marshal. Perhaps 20 ships destroyed, but the humans seem willing to sacrifice 10 ships to destroy one of ours." Thekvar studied the tactical display showing human space. Red markers indicated successful purifications of outer colonies, but several human worlds were still broadcasting defiant messages across all frequencies. "What are these broadcasts saying?" Kreldar activated the communications array. Human voices filled the command center, speaking in their crude language. The universal translator provided interpretation. "Remember, New Busan, remember New Busan, remember New Busan." The message repeated endlessly from every human colony, space station, and ship. It had become a battle cry, a promise of vengeance that chilled even Thekvar's hardened warrior instincts. "War Marshal," called Science Administrator Velmoth from the Stellar Monitoring Station. "I'm detecting minor fluctuations in Velketh Prime's emission patterns." Thekvar moved to the science station. "Significance?" "Probably nothing. Stars naturally vary in their output cycles, but the pattern is unusual. I'll continue monitoring." The War Marshal returned his attention to the human problem. In his experience, most species broke after losing their first world. The humans seemed to be getting stronger and more desperate. "Send orders to Fleet Commander Zeklon. Begin purification of the human colony, designated Harmony Station. Make sure the entire human command structure witnesses the destruction." "At once, War Marshal." But when the purification fleet arrived at Harmony Station, they found something unprecedented. The human colony had been evacuated, but not abandoned. Instead, it had been turned into a massive trap. The orbital platforms were loaded with antimatter charges. As soon as the Keltharan ships entered bombardment range, the humans detonated everything at once. The explosion was visible from 3 star systems away. "How many ships did we lose?" Thekvar demanded when the reports came in. 47 vessels, War Marshal. The entire purification fleet." Thekvar felt something he hadn't experienced in centuries. Uncertainty. The humans had sacrificed an entire colony just to destroy Keltharan ships. What kind of species valued revenge over their own territory? More disturbing reports arrived over the following days. Human ships were appearing throughout Keltharan space, conducting hit-and-run attacks on supply lines and communication relays. They fought with a fury that seemed to grow stronger with each defeat. "War Marshal," Velmoth called again from the science station. "The stellar fluctuations are increasing. Velketh Prime's core temperature has risen by 0.3%. Is this normal?" "Unlikely. Stars don't typically show such rapid changes without external influence." External influence. Thekvar's warrior instincts began sending warning signals. Could this be artificial? Velmoth's mandibles clicked nervously. Theoretically possible, but it would require technology beyond anything we've encountered. The power needed to affect stellar processes is... Could the humans have such technology? Impossible. "War Marshal, they're a young species with primitive understanding of stellar physics." But Thekvar was no longer certain about human capabilities. They had already surprised him with their tactical adaptability and willingness to sacrifice everything for revenge. "Begin deep scans of Velketh Prime. I want to know if anything foreign is affecting our star." The scanning results took 6 hours to complete. When they came back, Velmoth's entire body was trembling. War Marshal, we've detected quantum field distortions in the stellar corona. The pattern suggests artificial manipulation of fusion processes. Thekvar felt cold fear creeping into his mind. Are you saying someone has placed a device inside our star? That appears to be the case. The quantum signatures are consistent with forced stellar destabilization. How long until we can remove this device? Velmoth consulted his calculations rapidly. War Marshal, if my readings are correct, the destabilization process may already be irreversible. Stellar collapse could occur within the next day cycle. The command center erupted in panicked voices as the implications sank in. Their sun was dying, and with it, everything in the Velketh system. How is this possible? Thekvar roared. How did they penetrate our defenses? How did they get close enough? To our star? War Marshal, called Intelligence Director Morthek from across the command center. We're receiving a transmission from human space. It's being broadcast on all frequencies throughout the galaxy. Put it through. The image of a human female appeared on the main screen. She wore a simple uniform and spoke with calm authority. Behind her, the emblem of Earth showed a blue planet surrounded by stars. This is President Yoon Mira of the Terran Republic. 72 hours ago, the Keltheran Empire murdered 2.5 million human civilians on New Busan colony. They called us contamination. They demanded our extinction. Thekvar watched with growing dread as the human leader continued. The Keltheran Empire has spent centuries purifying what they consider inferior species. We have found the remains of dozens of dead worlds, each one marked with Keltheran victory monuments. Billions of innocent beings have died to satisfy Keltheran ideas of purity. The president paused, and when she continued, her voice carried a weight that made Thekvar's exoskeleton shiver. Today we are broadcasting this message as Velketh Prime enters its final destabilization phase. In approximately 18 hours, the Keltheran homestar will go supernova. Every planet, space station, and ship in that system will be destroyed. Panic spread through the command center. Officers were shouting orders, trying to organize evacuation fleets that couldn't possibly save 18 billion lives in 18 hours. This is humanity's response to genocide, President Mira continued. We do not purify, we do not cleanse, we obliterate. Any species that chooses to murder human civilians will face the same fate as the Keltherans. The transmission ended, leaving the command center in chaos. War Marshal, Velmoth called desperately. Stellar core temperature is rising exponentially. We have perhaps 12 hours before the cascade becomes visible from orbit. Thekvar's mind raced through possibilities. Evacuation was impossible on such a short timeline. Military response was useless against a weapon already inside their star. Negotiation seemed pointless with a species that had just demonstrated the power to kill suns. Contact all Keltheran fleets, he ordered. Emergency withdrawal from human space, all forces to retreat immediately. War Marshal, what about our conquest fleets? They're in the middle of purifying 3 human colonies. Abort all purification operations. Get our people away from human territory before they decide to kill more stars. As evacuation ships began launching frantically from Velketh Prime, Thekvar realized the magnitude of their mistake. They had assumed humans would respond like every other species they had purified, with fear, surrender, and eventual extinction. Instead, the humans had responded with something the Keltherans had never encountered. Absolute, merciless retaliation that made their own purification campaigns look gentle by comparison. War Marshal, reported Communications Director Yelnash. We're receiving surrender offers from 17 different human colonies. They're offering to negotiate. Thekvar studied the messages with his military mind. These are not surrender offers, they're demands. Look at the language. The human messages all carried the same basic content. Complete Keltheran withdrawal from all systems within 50 light-years of human space. Immediate cessation of all purification activities. Reparations for New Busan in the form of territorial concessions. They're dictating terms to us, Kreldar said in amazement. While our star dies, they're telling us what we must do to avoid losing more systems. More systems? Thekvar asked. War Marshal, Intelligence reports suggest the humans have built multiple stellar weapons. Their stealth technology allowed them to penetrate our most secure space. If they can destroy Velkith, they can destroy any of our systems. The reality of their situation settled over Thekvar like a crushing weight. In trying to purify one young species, they had awakened something far more dangerous than anything they had ever encountered. Begin immediate evacuation of all non-essential systems, he ordered. Withdraw all fleets to the core territories, and send a message to the human leadership. What message, War Marshal? Thekvar looked at the tactical display showing his dying star. Tell them we surrender. Around him, the greatest military force in the known galaxy scrambled to flee from a species they had dismissed as contamination. In 18 hours, Dr. Shin Aryam sat in the Earth Ethics Council chamber, staring at the countdown timer on the main screen. 18 hours and 37 minutes until Velkith Prime reached critical mass. 18 hours until 18 billion Keltheran lives ended in stellar fire. The chamber was filled with humanity's greatest moral thinkers, scientists, and philosophers. They had been debating for 6 hours straight, and still no consensus had emerged. The weapon can still be deactivated, insisted Dr. Park Jin-hyuk, the council's senior ethicist. We received the abort codes from Dr. Han's team. One transmission, and we can stop this madness. And then what? Asked military advisor Colonel Bae Soo-hyun. The Keltharans retreat, rebuild their fleets, and return in 50 years to finish what they started. How many more new Busans will burn while we congratulate ourselves on our mercy? Ambassador Baek Ji-young activated the holographic display showing intelligence reports. We've confirmed that the Keltharans are attempting massive evacuations. Their messages indicate they're willing to negotiate complete withdrawal from human space. Of course they are, said strategic analyst Cho Young-ho. They're about to lose their entire home system. Desperation makes everyone negotiable. Dr. Aryam stood up to address the council. Colleagues, we need to remember what we're really discussing here. This isn't a military target or even a planet. We're talking about destroying an entire star system. Children, families, civilians who have never heard of humans. Just like the children on New Busan never heard of Keltharans, Colonel Bae replied coldly. Just like the families on dozens of other worlds the Keltharans purified over the centuries. So, debate continued as the clock ticked down. Through the chamber's windows, Earth looked peaceful and blue, rotating slowly against the starfield. It was hard to believe that humanity now possessed the power to snuff out stars like candles. Dr. Aryam called Communications Director Yim Tae-hoon. We're receiving a direct transmission from the Keltharan leadership. They're requesting to speak with the Ethics Council specifically. Put it through. The image that appeared was different from the aggressive war marshal they had seen before. This Keltharan was older, with scarred carapace and tired eyes. When he spoke, his voice carried desperation. Human leaders, I am Elder Marshal Korveth of the Keltharan High Command. We formally request cessation of your stellar weapon. Doctor, Park Jin-hyuk leaned forward. Are you prepared to end all purification activities? Yes. Complete withdrawal from human space. No further hostile actions against your species. What about reparations for New Busan? Ambassador Baek asked. We offer territorial concessions. 3 star systems of your choice from our outer territories. The offer was more generous than anyone had expected. But Dr. Aryam could see doubt in her colleagues' faces. Elder Marshal, she said carefully, how do we know you'll honor these agreements once the immediate threat is removed? The Keltharan's mandibles clicked in what might have been bitter laughter. Because, human leader, you have demonstrated the power to destroy stars. No agreement we make could be more binding than that knowledge. After the transmission ended, the debate grew more intense. Half the council wanted to accept the Keltharan surrender and abort the stellar weapon. The other half argued that mercy now would only delay the inevitable. Think about the precedent, urged Dr. Lee Min-seo, the council's youngest member. If we destroy their entire star system, what message does that send to other species? We become the monsters we claim to fight against. And if we don't, countered strategic analyst Cho, what message does that send? That humans can be murdered without real consequences? That our threats are empty? Dr. Ariam felt the weight of the decision crushing down on her. As head of the Ethics Council, her recommendation would carry enormous influence with President Mira. Dr. Ariam, Communications Director Yim called out. Priority transmission from the Velketh system. It's from Keltharan civilians. The screen filled with images that broke her heart. Keltharan children looking up at their star with large, frightened eyes. Families huddled together in evacuation centers, knowing there weren't enough ships to save them all. One young Keltharan spoke directly to the camera, the translation appearing as subtitles. Please, humans. We never wanted war. We never knew about the purifications. We just want to live. The chamber fell silent as more messages played. Keltharan civilians apologizing for their government's actions. Parents begging humanity to spare their children. Ordinary people who had no part in the New Busan massacre facing death for crimes they didn't commit. This is emotional manipulation, Colonel Bay said, but her voice lacked conviction. This is reality, Dr. Park replied. These are the people we're about to kill. Dr. Ariam checked the countdown. 14 hours remaining. Time was running out for both species. I need to contact President Mira, she announced. The council will make its recommendation within the hour. The final debate was the most heated yet. Dr. Park Jin-hyuk presented the case for mercy. The Keltharans had surrendered, offered reparations, and promised to end their expansion. Destroying their civilization would make humanity no better than the purifiers themselves. Colonel Bae Soo-hyun argued for completing the mission. The Keltharans had committed genocide for centuries and would do so again if given the chance. Only total victory would ensure human safety. When the vote came, it was closer than Dr. Ariam had expected. 7 council members voted to abort the weapon. 8 voted to let it complete its deadly work. The council recommends allowing the stellar weapon to complete its function, Dr. Ariam announced to President Mira over secure channels. The majority believes that mercy now would invite future atrocities. President Mira was quiet for a long moment. And your personal opinion, Doctor? Dr. Ariam looked at the countdown timer. 12 hours and falling. Madam President, I voted to abort. But I understand why the majority chose differently. The Keltharans created this situation when they decided to murder our people. Noted. Stand by for my decision. The next few hours passed in agonizing tension. President Mira consulted with military advisors, colonial governors, and survivor representatives from New Busan. The entire human government was paralyzed by the magnitude of the choice. 8 hours before stellar collapse, Dr. Ariam received word that President Mira had made her decision. The Ethics Council was ordered to stand down. The stellar weapon would not be aborted. But Madam President, Dr. Ariam protested over the communication link. The Keltharans have children in that system, innocent civilians. So did New Busan. The president replied quietly. Dr. Ariam, I've spent the last day reviewing intelligence on Keltharan purification campaigns. They've committed genocide against 43 different species over the past 3 centuries. Billions of innocent beings died because the Keltharans thought they were contamination. President Mira's image showed the strain of command. If we show mercy now, how many more species will they purify in the future? How many more New Busans will burn because we weren't strong enough to stop them when we had the chance? Dr. Ariam understood the logic, but it didn't make the decision easier. What have we become? We've become survivors, the president said, and we've ensured that our children will survive too. As the final hours ticked away, desperate Keltharan messages flooded human communication channels. Offers of total surrender, massive reparations, even turning over their entire military fleet to human control. But it was too late. At the 6-hour mark, Dr. Han Junho confirmed that the stellar cascade had reached the point of no return. Even destroying the quantum device wouldn't stop the chain reaction now building in Velketh Prime's core. Dr. Ariam watched the final Keltharan evacuation efforts through long-range telescopes. They managed to save perhaps 2 million people from their homeworld, loading them onto whatever ships could reach escape velocity in time. 16 billion would die with their star. Dr. Ariam called technician Lim Woojin from the observatory station. Velketh Prime is entering final cascade phase, core temperature rising exponentially. She could see it now through the telescope array. The star that had warmed the Keltheran homeworld for millions of years was growing brighter, its surface beginning to boil with increasing violence. All observation stations, prepare for stellar event documentation, she announced. Whatever we've done here, history needs to witness it. 3 hours before the end, the Keltheran sent one final message. Elder Marshal Korveth appeared on screen, his ancient features showing defeat and resignation. Humans of Earth, we acknowledge our error. We underestimated your species and paid the ultimate price. We ask only that you remember this day when you look upon other young species. Do not become what we were. The transmission ended just as Velketh Prime began its final collapse. Dr. Ariam watched the readings as the star's core temperature spiked beyond measurement. Gravitational sensors detected massive disruptions as the stellar material began falling inward. Stellar collapse initiated, reported technician Lim. Supernova in 30 minutes. Around the chamber, people held their breath. Humanity was about to witness the birth of its reputation as the species that could kill stars. When Velketh Prime exploded, the light was visible across half the galaxy. For 3 seconds, that single star outshone an entire spiral arm. 50 years after the Velketh supernova, Professor Lim Sungmin walked through the new Busan Memorial Station, recording his final interviews for the definitive history of humanity's rise to galactic dominance. The memorial station orbited the ruins of New Busan Colony, now a carefully maintained monument to the 2.5 million humans who had died there. The planet's surface remained glassed and lifeless, but humanity had built something beautiful in its orbital space. Tell me about the day we became the apex species, Sungmin said to his first interview subject, Admiral Choi Hyunwoo, now 83, years old and still sharp as a blade, sat in his wheelchair overlooking the memorial gardens, his weathered hands folded carefully in his lap as he remembered. The day Velketh exploded, everything changed, Hyunwoo said. Within a week, we had 17 different alien species requesting defensive alliances with Earth. They weren't afraid of the Keltharans anymore. They were afraid of us. Sungmin nodded, making notes on his tablet. How did it feel to suddenly be the most feared military force in the galaxy? Necessary, the Admiral replied without hesitation. Fear keeps the peace. Before Velketh, dozens of aggressive species were expanding through force. After Velketh, they all decided diplomacy was more attractive. The professor moved to his next interview. Dr. Shin Ariam, now Director Emeritus of the Galactic Ethics Institute, had spent 5 decades wrestling with the moral implications of stellar warfare. Do you regret the decision? Sungmin asked. Dr. Ariam looked out at the slowly turning planet below. I regret that it was necessary, but I've seen the intelligence reports on what the Keltharans were planning. They had target lists for 47 human colonies. They intended to purify our entire species. She paused, watching ships move through the memorial space. Sometimes I think about those 16 billion Keltharans who died. Then I think about the 16 billion humans who are alive today because we stopped the purification campaigns. Some critics argue that humanity has become too powerful, too willing to use extreme force. Our critics are species that have never faced extinction, Dr. Ariam replied. Easy to judge from a position of safety. Sungmin's next stop was the Tactical Center, where he interviewed Captain Oh Minju, now Fleet Admiral of the Stellar Defense Force. She commanded humanity's fleet of starkiller vessels, each one capable of destroying entire solar systems. How many stellar weapons does humanity currently possess? Sungmin asked. That information is classified, Admiral Oh replied. But I can tell you that every major human colony is protected by stellar defense systems. Any species that attacks human civilians will face immediate retaliation. Do you think we've gone too far? Become the very thing we fought against? Admiral O considered the question carefully. The Keltharans purified species because they thought they were superior. We destroy stars because we refuse to be victims. There's a difference. The interview was interrupted by a priority communication from the bridge. Admiral, we're receiving reports of a slave raid against the Centauri colony. 3 ships of unknown configuration. Admiral O stood immediately. Species identification? Working on it now, Admiral. But the attack pattern suggests the Vorthan collective. Sungmin watched as the Admiral's expression hardened. He had seen this look before, on the faces of humanity's leaders when they decided to deploy ultimate force. Prepare Strike Fleet 7 for stellar deployment, Admiral O ordered. If the Vorthons want to test our resolve, they can join the Keltharans in extinction. Admiral, the communications officer called back. The Vorthon ships are withdrawing. They're broadcasting surrender codes and requesting mercy. Too late, Admiral O said coldly. They fired on human civilians. Launched the Star Killers. Sungmin realized he was witnessing history in real time. Within hours, another star system would die because someone had made the mistake of attacking humans. His final interview was with the person who had made the original decision. President Yoon Mira, now 91 years old, served as elder advisor to the current government. Do you ever question whether we made the right choice? Sungmin asked. The former president looked at him with eyes that had seen the birth and death of stars. Professor, in the 50 years since Velkith, how many human colonies have been attacked by hostile aliens? None, Sungmin admitted. How many species have attempted genocide against human settlements? None. How many times have we been forced to use stellar weapons since the Keltharan campaign? Sungmin thought about it. 17 times, against species that attacked human civilians. 17 dead star systems, President Mira said, versus the hundreds of worlds that would have burned if we had shown mercy to the Keltharans. She gestured toward the memorial display showing the names of New Busan's dead. Those people died because humanity was seen as weak, because we tried to be peaceful explorers instead of warriors. That mistake cost us 2.5 million lives. But at what cost to our souls? Sungmin asked. Our souls? President Mira smiled sadly. Professor, our souls were lost the moment we decided that some threats require absolute response, but our children are alive. Our species is safe. Our colonies grow and prosper under the protection of stellar fire. As evening fell over the memorial station, Sungmin compiled his final thoughts. Humanity had indeed become the galactic apex species, but the transformation had come at a terrible price. Human diplomatic policy was simple. Any attack on human civilians resulted in the complete annihilation of the attacking species' home system. No warnings, no second chances, no mercy. The policy had been tested 17 times, and 17 species had learned too late that humanity's threats were not empty. The galaxy was more peaceful now than it had been in centuries. Aggressive expansion had ended. Slavery was almost extinct. Genocide had become unthinkable because everyone knew what happened to species that tried it. But peace enforced by the threat of stellar annihilation was a fragile thing. Humanity ruled through fear, and fear could breed resentment. The question isn't whether we made the right choice, Dr. Ariam had told him during their interview. The question is whether future generations will be wise enough to use this power responsibly. As Sungmin finished his research, he looked out at the ruins of New Busan one last time. The planet where humanity's innocence had died and where its supremacy had been born. In the memorial garden, children from human colonies throughout the galaxy came to learn about their history. They stood before the simple monument that bore the names of every person who had died in the massacre. The inscription was written in Korean and Standard Galactic, "Never again, never forgotten. New Busan lives." Above the memorial, holographic displays showed the current status of human space. 300 colonies, 500 million people, all protected by the knowledge that their government would kill stars to keep them safe. And in the deep archives below the memorial, sealed behind layers of security, sat the technical specifications for Project Stellarside, the knowledge of how to turn any star into a weapon, waiting for the day when humanity might need to remind the galaxy once again that some species should never be threatened. The Keltherans had wanted to teach humanity about purification. Instead, they had created something far more terrifying, a species that could purify entire star systems with the push of a button. As Sung Min's transport ship departed the memorial station, he looked back at the monument to humanity's transformation. New Busan had been the graveyard of human innocence, but from that graveyard had risen an empire that made the stars themselves into weapons. The galaxy was safer now, protected by the knowledge that humanity would go to any length to defend its people. But it was also more dangerous because the protectors had proven they were willing to become destroyers when threatened. History would remember the Velketh supernova as the day humanity claimed its place as the galaxy's apex predator, and every species in known space would remember that the humans who built gardens and wrote poetry were also the ones who could kill suns. The age of human dominance had begun with stellar fire, and it would endure as long as the stars themselves burned in the sky.